Welcome to the Diverse Minds podcast, where we give you the tips, tools, and techniques you need to be a mentally healthy and inclusive leader. Each week, you'll hear about a variety of topics linked to mental health, well-being, and diversity that will enhance both your professional practice and personal well-being. Welcome to the 202nd episode of the award-winning Diverse Minds podcast. In this mini-series, we're talking about friendship and mental health. And to join me today are authors Christine Pride and Jo Piazza, whose new book, You Are Always Mine, is due for release this month. And it covers the topic of an interracial friendship dynamic. Christine Pride is a long-time publishing veteran, having worked with a variety of established and debut writers and published many New York Times bestsellers over her editorial career. In addition to now writing novels and select teaching and coaching, Christine pens a regular column, Race Matters, for Cup of Joe. Jo Piazza is an award-winning journalist and editor who has written for the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, Glamour and Elle, the best-selling author of The Knockoff, How to Be Married, Fitness Junkie, and Charlotte Walsh Likes to Win. She currently lives in Philadelphia with her husband and 3 children. So, Christine and Jo, a huge welcome to the show.
Yeah, we're so happy to be here.
We're so happy to be here.
Oh, no, it's brilliant. And I just read out your bios and, of course, mentioned your book that's going to be released in the UK on the 20th of July, You Are Always Mine. But can you tell the listeners what you're working on at the moment? Maybe there's something special. Maybe there's another book in progress. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, You Were Always Mine, our new novel, is really our focus right now because we're talking, we're about to go on tour through the United States for this book. So we're doing all of the interviews, the TV, the podcasts, and we get to hit the road together, which I think is a really special time for our friendship when we get to go on book tour together, because we get to enjoy it and live it up in cities all around the country.
That sounds hugely exciting, especially as the States is so vast. So I'm sure that it's going to be grueling for you, but you get to have fun along the way.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. And also, this is the best part, right? You were just like Jo and I talking and writing and, in a Google Doc, and then the book comes out and you actually get to go talk to readers and, have these events and connect with people. And that's so much a part of why we do this, to be able to, have these kind of conversations and eat good food on the road. So we're excited to do both.
Oh, amazing. And so how did you both become authors and how did you end up writing together as friends?
Well, I have been writing books for, I guess, about a little over 10 years now, which is crazy to me. I was a journalist for a long time and still am sometimes. And Christine was actually my editor on my last solo novel, Charlotte Walsh Likes to Win, which is about a woman running for office here in the States. And we became very close. And Christine's been an editor for a long time at various publishing houses here in the US. And that we knew we wanted to work on a project together. And that's how we started our co-writing journey together with our first book, We Are Not Like Them, and now with You Were Always Mine.
Yeah. And for my part, I've spent my entire career as a book editor. That's, is behind the scenes, sort of helping authors and writers usher their projects into the world, which I love doing. And so it was a little bit of a career pivot for me when Jo and I started writing books together. We Are Not Like Them. Our first book was actually my first book. And so it's just been an interesting, obviously, turn of events, and one of those things where kind of life unfolds in the way it should, but in the way you least suspect, right? Like Jo and I met and hit it off, and I hadn't thought of writing a book, and then we did, and then it was a success, and we're doing it again, and it just builds on each other. But so like I said, unexpected but a lot of fun, and I wouldn't be anywhere but here right now.
Oh, that's really, really lovely to hear. And on that, then, what does the term friendship mean to you? And how does it support your mental well-being in the publishing and writing process? So, small question there for you both.
Yeah, not a big question at all, Layla, no. I mean, for both of us, I think that friendship is the backbone of our lives. Our first book, We Are Not Like Them, explored friendship, a really intense interracial friendship, and those 2 women confronting race and social justice issues in their lives. And, for us, we see so many books that are written about romantic love that don't talk nearly enough about the friends who have supported us for our whole lives. So both of us are deeply loyal friends, to all of the other women and some men in our lives, and then also to each other. And I think that our friendship informs the writing of our books in a lot of ways. I think it makes it a much more intimate story because we can both bring our own stories to the table. In this case, with the new one, with You Were Always Mine, we had two very different perspectives on motherhood. The book is about motherhood, and Christine is child-free by choice. I have been making 3 kids for the past 6 years since we've been working together. And we got to have these really deep and intimate conversations, both, just as friends, that also then made it into our work. And I think that's a really beautiful thing that, people who aren't collaborating in their novels don't often get to have.
I agree with that. And just to add, I think it's hard work, right? Like writing a book is turns out very hard. And even the publicity process and as we mentioned, going on tour, I mean, we're so excited to do it, but it's also, work and daunting and putting yourself out there and self-promotion and all that. And it is nice to do that with a friend, right? To like have that support network and emotional support when you're looking at your somebody who says something unkind in a Goodreads review, right? Or
Which happens.
which happens.
Yeah.
Or, you're so tired at the end of an event and you just need a granola bar and somebody can, anticipate that. So those little touchstones of support really mean a lot too.
And I think it's really helpful you've mentioned the dynamic of friendship and motherhood, actually, because this is something that I feel we don't talk about enough in the global north. And I think, Christine, like you, I'm child-free by choice. I'm really happy with my choice. I'm really empowered by my choice. But the way that we're looked at and the way that friendship changes and friendships change and being called selfish. And I've kind of thought about this a lot. And I've thought about the fact that society feel that women who choose to be child-free by choice are selfish because we're living our life in the way that we want to, and actually not the way society dictated to us a lot of the time. So how do you what's your thoughts on navigating friendships that change due to motherhood? And there's a whole well-being element to that as well. So I'd really love to hear your thoughts on that.
Totally. And amen to all that you said. I think and this is one of the themes that our novel explores too. It's really hard in society when, you're sort of off whatever society is deemed the best, most virtuous and conventional path, which, in our world is really motherhood. And so not doing that is a choice that is judged, but it also leaves you a little bit feeling a little bit outside of these main conversations, right, around motherhood and womanhood. And in my late 20s, early 30s, when people were starting to have kids and my friends are starting to have kids, I worried about that a lot. I mean, I think you worry about that anyway, whether you have kids or not, how your friendships are going to change by your own, life developments. But in particular, I did worry that it was going to create kind of a chasm between, my close friends and I, in terms of they're having a relationship or a scenario that, I don't understand and I'm not a part of. And so much bonding happens around motherhood, right? And being in the trenches. But I'm happy to say that really didn't come to be. When my friends had young kids, I think the biggest challenge was, obviously, people get so busy and so consumed logistically and emotionally with young children. And so it's hard to invest the same level in friendships. But, I had decided that I was just going to cut people a lot of slack for that. Did some relationships inevitably and maybe even permanently change because of that? Maybe. But for the majority of my close friendships, we were able to navigate that terrain. And a lot of it also is because of respect for choices. Like my close friends respect the fact that I've made a different choice. Sometimes I think they're even secretly a little bit jealous of it. And I respect genuinely and wholeheartedly their choices. And so I think that is such a big factor in terms of, maintaining the same level of friendships despite our choices.
Thank you, Christine. Anything from you, Jo?
Yeah, I have to say, I think that everything Christine said is spot on. When it comes to navigating friendships and motherhood, it gets really fraught sometimes. I had kids late, so all of my friends had children before I did, and I felt a real loss because it was something I wasn't participating in. But then I realized that for me, that was all on me. I was the one that was choosing that. I was the one choosing not to participate, and not to reach out because of my own baggage and crap. And then once I had kids, I think I began to appreciate my friendships with both mothers and non-mothers even more, because I want someone that I can talk to where I don't have to hear about children ever at all. Like there's no mention of a child. A child's not going to run into the room. I need those spaces outside of motherhood. And I don't I often think that in culture and in media, mothers and women who are child-free are often pitted against each other. And one of the things that Christine and I realized while writing You Were Always Mine is that that's bullshit. There's a lot of myths that everyone has about both mothers and about child-free women. And we realized that, obviously we have so much more in common than not in common. And that I think there's a false narrative there pitting these two groups of women together when honestly we're so similar, and we also just want to be together. We just want the same things, except for one thing: kids, which I get. I understand.
And it's funny because just to piggyback off that again, I think it's also like the aspect of there's certain aspects of people's lives, our friends' lives, and even when it comes to motherhood, that we may be jealous of, as I mentioned earlier. But it's so somebody might say, oh, I wish I had more free time, like you, child free time, or Jo said, where you have a space where you're not thinking about your kids. Or I might think, it is actually really nice to be lockstep with kind of social trends, right? And participate in some of these bigger conversations. So, I just add that to say, I don't think it's like an all or nothing proposition in terms of like everything about motherhood or having kids is one thing or the other. It's like any decision you make in your life, there are going to be aspects of it that, you may still wish you had. And that's just human nature. And that's just going to be a part of, living life.
And I'm so pleased you both mentioned that point about pitting women against each other, because absolutely that happens. Like, are you in the in group? Are you in what society says? Are you out? So yeah, I also wanted to pick up on the other aspect in your book. So there's motherhood and there's the interracial element of it, and cross-cultural as well. So there's interracial and there's cross-cultural, and they're two slightly different things. And I just wondered like what your thoughts were at the moment. And of course it depends on the state, it depends on people, it depends on individuals. But this Britain's very, very small. So, we still have to have these dialogues. And I don't think we're there in terms of interracial, cross-cultural friendships at all. I think the gap's gotten wider. But I wonder if you had any thoughts about that kind of the reference point and interracial friendships, motherhood, that kind of discussion, where it's all sitting at the moment. And you might want to focus on your particular area where you live or your state. But yeah, just really would love to hear that from you.
Well, one of the statistics that we said a lot when we were working on our first book, We Are Not Like Them, is, and I always get this number wrong, I'm going to need Christine to chime in, but that is it 75%, Christine?
90% actually. It's higher.
90%. 90% of white people don't have a close friend of another race. And I think that was just in the States, but I imagine it may also track over in
I would imagine. Yeah,
over in the UK. And we would throw that out in interviews and in book club discussions, and it's a high number. So people are shocked, but then we're like, think about your friend group. And then also here's a little exercise. Go out, like when you're out in the world, when you're at a restaurant, when you're walking down the street, how many interracial friend pairings do you see? And once you think about that, you can't unsee it. People do tend to make friends who are similar to them because it is often in lots of ways, right? Mothers tend to be friends with other mothers, sometimes because it's easier for them. And we discovered that in talking about our first book and the second book in You Were Always Mine, there's a second interracial friendship between a Black woman named Cinnamon and a white woman named Daisy. And it's not just interracial, it's also intergenerational, which I think is really, really important and also something we don't see nearly enough. Christina's my first close friend who is a Black woman, and I have a lot of work friends and acquaintances, but Christine, for her part, as a Black woman, has a lot of friendships of people with other races, and so we were bringing those two very different perspectives to both of these books.
And I think even in the case of Daisy and Cinnamon, our two characters in You Were Always Mine, Cinnamon is a Black woman, Daisy is a white woman, and as Joe mentioned, they are maybe 15 years apart or so in age, but they have this real unlikely connection, and are kindred spirits in a lot of ways because of their backgrounds and some experiences they've had. And we are really interested in this idea of what brings us together across cultural or racial lines, right? What are these points of connection? And particularly for these two women who otherwise might not have met, society wouldn't bring them together. They certainly wouldn't be necessarily sharing such an intimate experience and situation together, in terms of custody of a child. And so, how does that come to be? And what does that tell us about the social connections that we make? And what does that force readers or inspire, we hope, readers to think about in terms of why they have made connections with people and who they've made connections with and why?
Yeah, thank you. That's really, really helpful. I think there are some stats that go across the UK, but I don't know what they are. But I remember having lots of discussions about this, particularly in 2020. So thinking about those friendships then, and one of the things I talked about in my episode last week was about, friendship and mental health and well-being overall, and the friendship breakup, which I think actually for me is definitely way more painful than a romantic relationship breakup. And you talk about that, Joe, you said there's so much about romantic love, but we wanted to explore these other ways of love in the book, which I think is beautiful. So what would be your tips around friendship breakup well-being? Like, how could you look after yourself when you have a friendship blip or a friendship breakup, because it is incredibly painful?
Oh, it's so hard. So hard. I mean, just as hard as a romantic breakup. And in a lot of ways, I think even harder, because romantic breakups have all these rituals around them,
Definitely.
movies and eating the ice cream and everybody, rallying around you. And we just don't have the same language or rituals or, even taking it as seriously as a romantic breakup. And so I think that's part of what can make it feel more isolating and lonely. And I think one of the ways to combat that is just really acknowledge how important it is, how tragic it is, how sad it is, to lose a friend, and just recognizing that and acknowledging it, I think really helps. It's like you have a right to feel so emotional and heartbroken. And sometimes women especially need that permission. I mean, we shouldn't, but sometimes it just helps to say, yes, your emotions are well-founded, and, I see you and I support you. And then, I think time, which is like so cliche. I mean, I'm just applying this to myself personally, that I had a terrible friendship breakup in my early 20s. And it took me a long time to get over it. And it's really kind of ironic how similar it is to a romantic breakup in that way. Like, they're all the stages of grief, I guess. And for me, I found it was similar. And as they tell you in romantic relationships, time heals all wounds. I think that's the case too with friendships.
Thanks, Christine. Joe, your thoughts?
And I think they're really complicated, right? And as Christine said, because we talk about, like ad nauseum, romantic comedies and chick lit talk about romantic breakups. Like there's templates for that. There's roadmaps for that. You kind of know how you're supposed to feel, but we don't see that for friendship breakups. And I do also believe that they're also a lot more devastating than romantic breakups a lot of the time. And it's actually really interesting because in the beginning of our new book, in the beginning of You Were Always Mine, Cinnamon and Daisy have been friends, and their friendship was unexpected. They meet like once a week on this park bench and they talk. It's very Tuesdays with Maury, to use an old reference. And one day Daisy disappears. Cinnamon thinks she's just ghosting her. And I think Cinnamon in the book, in You Were Always Mine, goes through all of those complex emotions. Like, did she ghost me? Is it okay for me to feel bad about this? Like, how should I feel? And she feels a little ashamed, a little embarrassed. She doesn't want to bring it up to anyone else in her life. And like that, I don't think that's something we see often in literature. We don't see those kinds of complex emotions around what to do when a friend goes away. And I'm really glad that we got to bring that to the page.
Yeah, I think that's lovely. Apart from, the Sweet Valley High and Mean Girls, but we know that actually there's so much more, especially in adult friendship. So yeah, thank you so much for that. And then I asked all my guests this, and you're incredibly busy women. You write books, you have editing careers, you do so much, and you're going on a book tour. So how do you look after your own mental health? And sometimes these are not easy topics to talk about. So would you like to share your top 3 tips each that you have that you'd like to share with listeners around looking after your mental well-being?
Yeah, I mean, I try to make this going out on book tour is something that and trying to take care of myself is something I think about a lot because it is work. But I always try to reframe it. I'm like, I get to go essentially on a trip with one of my girlfriends to all of these cities where we all know we know people, and we get to see them and we get to see fans. And I think it's just remembering like amidst the busyness to be very grateful for that this is something fun and this is something exciting. And then I also make sure I get a ton of sleep. I extricate myself from, because it's like you have a party every night, right? But if you have a party every night, you're going to turn into like Lindsay Lohan. So you have to be like, I've got to put myself to bed at 10 o'clock. I also like can't eat all of the disgusting food just because I'm on the road, because I'm on the road for 10 days. And you know what? I do have to make sure that I get outside and get like a half an hour of exercise every day. And it's just kind of protecting yourself and knowing those things that you need to do to maintain your mental health. That I didn't know for a long time in my 20s. I was a travel journalist, so I traveled constantly, and I feel like I didn't protect my mental health nearly as much as I needed to. But now that I'm a woman in the midst of middle age, I've got my stuff. Got my stuff I have to do.
I hear you, Jo. I am too. Sorry, Christine.
I know, I was just going to say the same thing. A woman in the midst of middle age. I like that. Sounds very poetic. And mine are similar. I think as you get older, being women in the middle age, you do take all of your health more seriously, right? Like the same way, my like physical health, is just like I have to think about it more than I did in my 20s, and be more thoughtful about it. And so for me, I, some overlap with Jo, like I really try to work out. That's really important to me, both, physically, but also as a stress reliever. It's like sort of the more intense and ridiculous the workout, the better. So I really try to carve out time for that. And then, my friends are really a huge emotional support to me. And so really staying connected, touching base, celebrating with them, having deep conversations, being open about if I'm stressed or, anxious or excited or what have you. Just like being able to have an outlet to let all those emotions that are cycling throughout, really, really helps me, and to feel their love and support, means a lot to me. So those would be my 2 main ones. I'll have to come up with a third one. I'll add it to the chat.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And of course, if people want to know more about you, your work, how should they contact you? I will, of course, include the links in the show note. But anything you would like to share with listeners now about getting in touch with you and how you like to be contacted?
Yeah. So, unfortunately, Instagram remains the best way to get in touch with me. I say unfortunately because for my own mental health, I kind of hate social media, but it also makes it easy to reach readers, and that's what we want to do. So I'm at Joe Piazza Author, and I also just launched a Substack called Over the Influence with Joe Piazza. And so I still haven't figured out an easy way for people to find those, but I guess if you go on Substack and put my name in, it should be there. But we post all of our stuff and behind the scenes fun tour stuff on Instagram. So that really is the best place to find us.
Yeah, same. Social media, just Instagram is the only platform I'm on, and I'm at C Pride. But we love to hear from readers. We love to hear from people. We love questions. So, please, everybody, don't hesitate to reach out. Do people still say slip into the DMs? Is that a thing?
Slide into the DMs is what it was. I don't think it was slide into the DMs.
That sounds very
evocative. Exactly. Spoken as a person in the midst of middle age.
In the midst of just in the midst of life. In the midst of life.
Oh, well, thank you so much for your time in, joining from the States. Thank goodness you're East Coast. Really, really appreciate it. I know the listeners are going to get so much out of this. I can't thank you enough. It's been an absolute joy to have you on the show. And yeah, I wish you all the best, and please keep in touch with us and let us know how it all goes.
Thanks so much, Layla. We appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you. Take care, both of you. And listeners, we will see you in the next episode, where, of course, we're approaching the 4-year landmark. So do stay tuned. Until then, everyone, take care.
Thanks for listening to the Diverse Minds podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you access your podcasts from. You can also connect with me on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Tune into next week's episode of the podcast, where I'll bring you more insights on mental health and inclusion. Bye for now.